my dogs are not okay, and they won't come upstairs to sleep. And I just see Toby like staring at the staircase, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm about to be in one of these podcasts as like the podcaster that randomly went missing because of the ghost upstairs. I swear to Jesus,
sucked him into a portal to the other side. Wait, that house is old though, right? It's old.
Yeah, and do you remember what I told you about the upstairs, right? In the attic?
No.
So, like, I think it was like 2 years ago, I was having like really weird dreams where it was that, what do you call that? Where you're like, you're waking up in your dream and
sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis. I've never had that before, and it would happen 2 or 3 times a week. And so, long story short, my friend Rachel sent me over this like medium years ago prior to this happening. And she was like, it was right when my grandma passed. And I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. Turns out she ends up now someone that I see on a regular basis, like once every 2 or 3 months. And she's turned into like a life coach. But as this was happening, I was like, I'm going to see Elena. And she immediately on the phone was like, where are you? She's like, you're not in New York. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm actually in Michigan. And she's like, all I'm seeing right now is energy above you. That's not light. It's dark. I was like, this is the reason why I'm calling you, because I'm having sleep paralysis dreams. And she's like, yeah, you have to cleanse your room or whatever. Like, you have to do something because I'm just seeing dark energy above you. Fast forward to a week later, my parents need me to get down their suitcases from upstairs in the attic. And I'm going upstairs, grab the suitcase, and then I see that my parents' house is not insulated with like that pink shit. What is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's insulated.
Insulation.
Insulation.
It's called insulation.
Right. I thought it was called asbestos. Is that wrong?
No, you don't want asbestos. That'll kill you.
Okay.
That's what they used to use asbestos.
Okay.
You don't want asbestos.
Well, it's insulated with old Detroit Free Press newspapers. I'm talking from 1913. The whole roof of the house is insulated with like old Detroit It's crazy. And so then I call Elena and I was like, so I don't know if this is what's causing this. And she's like, you got to take it out. Take it all out. Yeah. Some of the front covers of the Detroit Free Press, like back in like the 20s and 30s, is wild.
Oh
yeah.
God. So is it still like that, or did you guys take it out?
No, we didn't take it out. So I'm pretty sure there's a bad spirit in here. 3, 2.
Hi, Dee.
Hi, Dee.
Where in the world are you now, Drew, my world traveler?
I think this is the first time that like I can consistently, for 2 episodes in a row, say that I'm recording from the same place I recorded last time, which is Michigan. I did.
Yeah, I was going to say, but you haven't been in Michigan
Right.
since the last episode.
I did go to Florida for 2 weeks. Okay.
And you also have plans to move back to New York already.
Plans to go back to the Big Apple.
Wow.
In about a week, and then we're just going to pick up right where we left off almost a year ago. I have not been in the city for almost a year.
Are you
Isn't
serious?
that crazy? Yeah.
Wow, the life of a dancer.
I know. It's been crazy. It's been a lot of fun, but it's time to hit the pavement, running hard until the next thing, you know? How are you? What's going on with you?
I'm good. You know, momming.
Momming hard.
There's like nothing quite new or exciting in this world. I'm trying to actually think, and it makes me sad when I'm going through a Rolodex of what I've done. Oh, well, I went about almost 2 weeks without going to the pediatrician, so that's my highlight.
Pediatrician is like for medicine, right?
For kids.
For kids.
Yeah. There's one really good looking pediatrician in the office.
Ooh.
And I cannot stand when I go there and get him, because he's one of those guys that knows he looks good, you know?
Okay.
I'm sure he's just, you know, milking it, right? He's like, you know, moms
I know I'm a doctor.
and stuff. And I know I'm hot, whatever.
Like a Soul Cycle instructor.
I wouldn't know because I never have time to go to Soul Cycle. But sure. But I hate it so much when they're like, oh, so-and-so is available to see the kids. And you know what? When you're taking your kids to the pediatrician and they're sick, you are also in survival mode. So that is the last person you want to see is someone that is remotely attractive, because it's kind of like when a camera's on your face, you're just like, oh my God, I look like a monster. Stop looking at me, and he just makes such intense eye contact. And he gets
You
really
you
close.
immediately take your hair out of the beanie and you try to rat it out and make it look a
Oh
little
no,
bit
I am putting the
presentable.
beanie more and more over my head.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's so funny too because Blake knows, and I'm like, oh my god, they booked, they made the appointment with him, and he's just like, oh, you're gonna go put some lipstick on.
I love Blake.
I know, he's just a very secure man.
I love that. I love that.
Anyway, so what is our drink today from Grandpa's Little Black Book?
This drink, this is not the drink that I wanted to pick, but Danielle insisted. All of our listeners will understand why I don't like this drink later on in the episode, but it is called the Sidecar. It is 1 ounce of brandy, 1 ounce of triple sec, and an 1/8 ounce of lemon juice in the glass, and you put it on a mixer and strain it into a regular glass, and you drink it. And you frost it with powdered sugar. I can't say the word.
Say the next part.
No, I can't.
Say the next part.
Okay.
You can do it.
To frost rim, rub a piece of lemon around the edge lightly, then invert glass into dish of powdered sugar so moistened edge will have particles of sugar adhering to it. Okay, I did it. This is like ASMR, like doing podcasts. In the editing, I do not even want to hear me say that word. I'm going to have you edit this part because I can't. These microphones pick up all the noises in the mouths. And anyways, it's the Sidecar and it's a really good drink. And funny story is about Grandpa's Little Black Book. My mom just told me that no one on my mom's side knew who had the Little Black Book.
I was wondering if this was going to
Yeah, now my aunts and uncles have been listening to the podcast and they're like, wait, what? And called my mom, and my mom's like, she tried to cover it up and it didn't go over well. And so now the cat's out of the bag. My mom has my grandpa's Little Black Book and we are using it on our podcast. So here we are.
A family secret has just been exposed.
A family secret has been exposed due to the Forensic Files Duo podcast. Hi, everyone! Welcome to the Forensic Files Duo podcast, where we recap, review, and provide updates on the cases featured on the true crime TV show Forensic Files. I'm Drew, and I know nothing about true crime.
And I'm Danielle, and I know way more than I'd like to know, but my anxious brain thinks by knowing more I'm safer. It might be a lie, but I hope I never have to find out. So here we are.
We've been best friends for 20, oh gosh, every time I see that number, 20 years. And it all started when we joined the forensics team in high school that no one else outside of Michigan seems to know about because it had nothing to do with forensic science.
Right, so it was a competitive speech team for drama kids, and we were in the duo category. In our first episode, we learned that the word forensics comes from ancient Greece and means speaking for judgment. So here we are, speaking for judgment.
But this time, we're forensicking about forensic science.
Now, for our regular disclaimer, we understand that we will be discussing a lot of sensitive topics, so although we may laugh at times, please remember that we are laughing at ourselves and ourselves only. We are not making light of what the victims and their families have gone through and may continue to be going through.
And in an effort to use the public's overall interest in the show Forensic Files and leverage the power of digital media, once the episode coverage is over, we will highlight 2 missing person cases. A case that's currently on the BIA's Missing and Murdered Indigenous People database, and another on the Black and Missing Foundation's website.
Today's episode is listed on Wikipedia as Season 1, Episode 3, called The House That Roared. This episode first aired on October 10th, 1996, and it covers the 1992 murder of Caren Campano in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Do we have any insight on this city in 1992, though?
We do. So this case takes place in 1992, but I think when anyone 30 and up hears Oklahoma City, they think about the Oklahoma City bombing. But we are about 3 years before that ever happens. However, I did find a meme on Reddit that someone posted about moving from rural Oklahoma to urban Oklahoma in the 90s. So the expectation image was the city from the cartoon Hey Arnold, and the reality image was from that adult cartoon show King of the Hill. And the characters in the King of the Hill picture are having a beer in their yard with their neighbors. So there was a commenter saying, oh, you have to go up to the old Northeast cities if you want anything like Hey Arnold. Then this whole debate started about where Hey Arnold is based off of. So I got way too invested. I don't know how we got here. But what was so funny, because another commenter also said, I moved here when I was 11 in 1993 from the Central Coast in California. Oklahoma at the time was distinctly its own thing. This was before the internet. Oklahomans were behind on fashion and trends, but it was also far less preoccupied with those things. They go on to say, now everyone feels too busy to care about anything, and all the changes make a lot of the areas and things feel like a bootlegged version of other cities. Listen, these are not my opinions, just, sharing insight from a local. So there you go, Oklahoma City in the early 90s.
Not a bootleg version of another city. That's iconic of a sentence to come up with. So this episode opens and we're told it's the summer of 1992 in Oklahoma City. We see a black and white reenactment scene that's being shot from outside of a house, and we can hear a couple having a very loud and very intense argument.
Peter then says,
on a hot summer evening in 1992, neighbors heard the familiar sound of an argument coming from the Campano residence.
This reenactment makes no sense per usual. We see a woman who I'm assuming is reenactment Caren walking out of the house while the man says, "Go, get out of here," as he follows her out.
Right. And he's telling her to get out, but he's taking himself out too, apparently. I'm questioning everything here because why did Caren drop her purse? Did you see her drop her purse?
Okay, I had to go back. That was a good catch. I had to rewind. I saw your notes and I had to go back. I didn't even notice that. So very good catch.
Will that be evidence or was that an actor's actual mistake? You know what I mean? I'm finding myself really digging deep here watching these reenactments.
Good. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So now we learn about Caren. She was just 2 weeks shy of her 43rd birthday and had just returned back from visiting her 3 children that still lived in New York.
Then we meet Chris. And Chris to me looks sus, very sus. I already feel like it's going to be Chris who did it after seeing him for the first time.
The fact that you said sus. So Blake does not get any of these terms whatsoever. Or what are they called? What do they call those things? They're
not acronyms. What's an acronym?
An acronym is letters, but they're but the hip language. See, now I sound like a grandma saying it.
I think we both do. Grandma and Grandpa here trying to keep up with the kiddos.
Just trying to know what's cool. Oh, but it was so funny because he's like, did you hear that the kids are saying sus lately for suspect? Well, it's so funny because he just doesn't get these things. And one time I was like, when I was pregnant, I'm just so looking forward to the day I can just get my body snatched. He's like taken? I was like, no, I'm not taken. Oh, he's going to hate this episode. So wait, I have an even better one. He told me about this moment at work that happened. And he's like, yeah, I'm getting hot and heavy, but I just, didn't say anything. And I'm like, I would hope you didn't get hot and heavy. I'm like, do you mean heated? You were getting heated? He's like, wait, is that not what it is? I was like, hot and heavy is intimate. When have you used this? When have you used it like that? He's thinking back in his brain.
How many times have you used this?
Yeah. He's trying to reverse.
Oh my God. Team Blake all the way. Team Blake.
Anyways, I was very confused of how they introduced Chris because at first I thought they were saying that he was the father of her children back in New York, but then we see him and he looks like he's 20 years old. He looks so young.
I know, beyond young. And Peter tells us she was 15 years older than Chris. Okay, before I judge, because if this was a man with a younger woman, most people wouldn't think anything of it. But I can't imagine this went over well at all when they got married in the 80s. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're not wrong because then Peter tells us.
Friends described them as an odd couple.
Okay, Drew, will you tell us who introduced Chris and Caren?
Oh, Karen's best friend, Chris's mother.
Messy.
Were you gagged?
Oh my God.
And also, photos Chris doesn't look like the actual Chris who was just interviewed.
Not at all. I had the exact same thought.
This whole beginning is a mess of information being dished out to us.
So as Peter is telling us about Chris having a troubled past and having been in jail for petty theft, they show him actually walking through what looks like a jail. So immediately I'm thinking there's no way Forensic Files got him to reenact being in jail and literally got a jail to participate in shooting this episode. So yeah, I'm thinking he's got to be currently in jail.
We find out that Caren was upset when she got back from New York, saying that she wanted to move back there for family, and
I was into drugs, and she was, nagging at me and trying to get me in drug programs, just trying to help.
So he has a drug problem, and Caren is financially supporting him. And the way he described her nagging at him, it just sounds more kind of like a mother-son dynamic. So there's nothing healthy about any of that.
No, and the neighbors heard them arguing frequently, and we meet one that heard Caren saying,
I could hear Caren screaming, and no, please, please, and don't do that. And couldn't make out a lot of what was being said, just a lot of screaming.
So, according to Chris, Caren left and went to the convenience store for personal items a few blocks away. Curious how he would know that, but I guess Forensics Files didn't mind leaving that little plot hole wide open for us.
Chris left too and went to the local bar for some drinks until about midnight.
He then calls her work the next morning to see if she showed up for work, but they tell him no and that she never even called in.
So then Chris calls the police to make a missing persons report, and the police look around and don't find anything unusual, but then Johnny Coleman from the homicide unit pops up and says,
if a person is going to run away or leave her husband, she's not just going to walk away and leave everything behind. She's going to take the things that mean the most to her, especially when you're dealing with a woman, things of, toiletries, makeup, and that kind of thing.
Way to categorize those things women just must need to leave their husbands.
Well, how else would a woman make it in this world without a man? And how else would a woman get a man without her lipstick, Drew?
Oh, okay. All of a sudden, Chris is like, thank goodness y'all are here because, by the way, my house just so happened to be burgled last night while I was at the bar.
Oh my God, everyone's listening. They're like, please tell me they're not going to do this whole episode in fake accents. Well, this then gives the police the opportunity to write up a search warrant, and Chris seems more than willing to just let them search the house.
He even comments that he hopes they find something that will help them find Caren.
Detective Johnny said the first thing he sees is the bed against the south wall, and I'm just not sure what in the feng shui that has to do with anything, but he also sees a trash bag on the floor, picks it up, and sees a dark brown stain on the carpet that appears to be blood.
There's so much there that it was still moist. Why must we use the word moist? I hate that word so much. But thank you for letting us know that it was still wet. Wet. Let's just say wet. Let's just use that word instead. Let's just say that, please.
Okay. All right. Johnny then uses hemosticks to test the substance.
The amount of times he says hemosticks in one sentence.
Take the dry hemastick and with your finger just lightly smear it on the suspect stain to where some of it's transferred onto the hemastick. Take a drop of distilled water, put it on the hemastick, flick off the excess water, and you have a dark green, which is a positive presumptive test for the presence of blood.
Are we going to have a true crime class on these sticks?
No, because they're just these little sticks that are used to detect blood. They're often used at doctor's offices if there's like blood in urine for UTIs and such, so nothing too groundbreaking.
Well, boom, bang, bop, it's blood.
It's blood. But what is groundbreaking is Joyce Gilchrist, our forensics chemist, and I love seeing a female chemist in the 90s. Go, Joyce! Yes. Okay, so she tells us.
I went on to do a octolony test. Is a species determination test to determine as to whether or not that blood came from a human or an animal source.
Once it's confirmed that it's human blood and not animal blood, I'm not sure what they thought, that it would just be like a puddle of animal blood coincidentally next to a missing woman's bed, but Detective Johnny says it was enough to convince him that they are not dealing with a routine missing persons case. I guess that's what it takes. Okay, noted.
We then see another shot of Chris. Every time he comes across the screen, I still get the shivers, and he just creeps me out.
I know. Chris is brought in for more questioning, and investigators are pretty sure that he knows more about Karen's whereabouts, but of course, he denies knowing anything.
But his alibi sucks. The bartender doesn't remember him being at the bar, and he pawned some of her things the morning after she went missing.
That does just not look good for Chris. We're told that they have nothing else to go on at this point besides running more tests in the house. And although there are no obvious signs of a struggle besides a huge puddle of human blood, they decide to look if there is any evidence that blood has been cleaned up in the house.
I'm just confused. There is human blood and evidence showing Chris pawned her things. Why can't the police do anything besides continue to look in the house? To me, that's enough evidence right there that they already have. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's definitely not for like a court of law.
Damn.
First, they need to determine how much blood is in that carpet and if that is a large enough amount of blood to prove that a human being couldn't survive that amount of blood loss. But I'm
Got it.
not even sure if they had that technology available at that time to, measure something like that. And then the bartender not being able to remember Chris being there isn't really evidence that he wasn't there. And him being an addict could explain him pawning things.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, so even if someone genuinely went missing, like he is an addict. So I'm sure this wasn't the first time he's done something like that if he has a drug problem that's been this ongoing issue. So at this point it's a lot of circumstantial stuff that wouldn't prove it was him beyond a reasonable doubt.
I guess, yeah. I didn't really think about that. I just was like, come on, the day after she went missing, he pawned all of her stuff off.
Doesn't look good.
There's a huge freaking blood stain on the carpet. Ugh. Well, to determine if blood has been previously cleaned up, there is a chemical used called luminol. And I am here for Joyce and how she tells us about this luminol. I think she's going to be the hero on this because she is on it.
Luminol is a fluorescence type chemical. Spray it on a substance that may contain blood. It reacts with the heme group in the blood itself. The iron portions will luminesce or fluoresce.
Now it's time for true crime class.
I knew it was coming. Okay, go ahead.
This is important because if you follow true crime cases, luminol is super well known. So when I found out this information about it, I was even surprised. If you Google luminol false positives, you will find that there are quite a few chemicals that will give false positives. So in this case, the way that they use luminol, it's pretty accurate for their investigation and they used it correctly. But when we get to that part and we see what lights up, there's no way that like Chris is dragging a pile of turnips or horseradish throughout the house. So yeah, like he's like popping bleach as champagne for, no.
Yeah.
So anyways, luminol does seem to have been accurately used in this investigation, but on crimesceneinvestigator.net, George Shiro from the Louisiana Police Crime Lab, he tells us about potential problems using luminol. He states that because it has several drawbacks as a presumptive test for blood, spraying luminol at a crime scene should be an investigator's last resort for detecting blood. The problems with luminol include the fact that it will give false reactions. Luminol will react with copper ions, copper compounds, iron compounds, and cobalt ions. You got it, Drew?
Yeah, duh. I know what cobalt ions is and copper compounds. I deal with them every day.
So, because I don't either.
Thank God.
The truth comes out.
The veil is revealed.
I am not someone who's acting like she knows everything because I am Googling everything. But societyforensics.org listed examples. Yeah, because George's paper just listed a bunch of stuff I can't pronounce too. So anyways, these things are like turnip pulp, parsnip pulp, horseradish pulp, and bleach. And unfinished edges of drywall.
Oh, shit.
Weird, right? Yeah.
So it's not really that, dependable.
Right, exactly. So now back to George's article. Studies have shown that luminol will cause the loss of several genetic markers as well. So because it's water-based, it could cause latent, possibly bloody impressions to smear. It could also further dilute an already diluted stain, and this may push the stain beyond the genetic marker analysis detection limits. Unfortunately, some crime scene investigators have used luminol as their first choice for detecting blood, but by doing that in such a reckless manner, it's possible to lose that valuable information from a blood stain. When searching for blood at a crime scene, especially blood that may have been cleaned up, an investigator should first use a high-intensity light to search for any traces of blood. These stains are not easy to eradicate. Diluted blood will often leave a brownish stain like we saw in this case. If a person has tried to clean it, the blood also has a tendency to flow into floorboard cracks, into carpet padding, behind baseboards, etc. By conducting a thorough examination with a high-intensity light source, the investigator can usually find those areas. These items can be then removed and collected, then submitted to the crime lab for confirmation. Now, because luminol is so sensitive to dilute bloodstains, it is occasionally used to enhance bloody impressions like shoe prints, fingerprints, etc. Luminol is not the best thing to use though for this. That's because it's a water base. Better methods for enhancing these bloody impressions, they want you to use either like this rapidly evaporating organic solvents. I have no idea what I'm saying at this point, but the reason why I included this is because all of a sudden I saw such as orthotolidine.
Orthotolidine is back. Orthotolidine. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, so that's literally the only reason why I just kept that last paragraph of a mouthful. And then I think they also use, just that classic fingerprinting. This was interesting though. You've always seen in like movies and stuff that they're putting this white dust on it. So it's called amido black staining technique, which is the fingerprinting technique. It's literally just the starch that's in food like flour.
What?
Yeah. And it creates a contrast so you can see those things.
Why don't they just use flour? It's probably cheaper, to be honest with you. Just go buy a bag of flour. That's what I would do.
Drew shows up to a crime scene with a bag of flour. I could bake you a cake.
Bake your cake and find the fingerprints.
A man of many talents.
Oh, God, I would love to be a detective. I would be terrible. Anyways, back to the episode. And I'm just going to say, but Peter is so dramatic about the fact that police need total darkness to run the luminol test.
To do the luminol test, investigators needed complete darkness, so they waited until nightfall.
They show photos of the room before they spray the luminol and then after, and it just lights up everywhere.
That first picture of the door after luminol shows a hell of a lot of blood that was cleaned up. Like, that was a jaw drop moment for me because that was insane.
Yeah, Peter uses the word horrific, and he is not wrong. The test shows that blood had been on the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It's all over the house.
Then they conclude from the luminol that the weapon used to cause these bloodstains was a blunt object. Like, couldn't it have been, though, a knife or something? How can you just automatically assume that it was a blunt object?
Yeah, I know we covered bloodstain analysis in episode 1 and whether, it's considered reliable evidence today or not. But I think what they're explaining here is far more of just basic physics.
They were in 2 trails, what we refer to as cast-off trails. So if you had an object, for example, in your hand, and that object was blood covered, and if you were swinging that object overhead, the centrifugal force of pulling the blood down to the end of the object will cast the blood in the direction the object is being swung. And in this case, it's going to the ceiling.
Then we see more blood stains that show up from the luminol. And I mean this with no disrespect, but these pictures reveal such a clear trail of blood that my brain wants to think these photos could not be possibly real.
Correct. I thought the same.
It feels like these photos that we're seeing should be from like an amateur murder mystery movie.
Yeah.
How is it possible to just let blood swipe across the door, drag across the entire floor of the entire house,
then dragged down every single stair and even down the walkway to the driveway outside? How on earth, if the neighbors heard yelling, which we found out in the beginning of the episode, but they didn't see a whole human body being dragged out to the driveway?
And then how is this murderer that confident in his cleaning skills to be like, I'll just wipe that away later?
The house was telling its story, one of an apparently gruesome attack.
Peter then says, was it Caren Campano's? And police still couldn't prove a murder was committed. Well, Joyce is back, and thank God for this woman. I wish we could have her on every episode.
Seriously, this is the first episode where we are halfway through and we haven't seen any horrific reenactments, have we?
Nope.
I actually find this episode possibly the least messy one we've seen, which isn't saying much, but now that you have said that, I think it's only because of Joyce.
Yep, it's because of Joyce. She just creates a really warm feeling, and I'm like, I will listen to you on luminol. She starts telling us about a measurement test, and Danielle, I think this is what you were referring to earlier.
Yes, I was writing my notes as I was watching, so when this part came up about the measurement test, the nerd in me got a little too proud of myself. So they go through a lot of science and math to determine if a person could survive this level of blood loss, and it did make me dizzy.
Oh, should we go through it?
Yes, let's give it our best shot.
Using a piece of the original carpet
and a weight to simulate a human head,
they pour human blood around the weight
until they create a stain measuring 887 square inches,
which is identical to the original blood stain discovered.
Medical examiner Fred tells us 1,300 to 1,400 cc's of blood would make that stain.
But Peter knows us better than we know ourselves and tells us
that's more than 40% of the blood volume of a woman Caren Campano's size. No one could survive with that amount of blood loss.
So I tried looking up what techniques are used today to measure the blood volume found at a crime scene.
Because that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a
Yeah.
lot to
And
do.
yeah, it is a lot to do and it seems a little archaic, but I did read that there is a way to do this from some spinning machine that can measure the weight of the blood, and through some smart math they can figure it out. But then I also found articles just as recent as of 2014 that referenced reconstruction like they did here. So not 100% sure what the standard is, but I thought it was interesting that this technique isn't totally outdated.
I thought it was such an old technique to use, but again,
Me too.
we're watching this from the 90s, and
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. But the fact that you just said in 2014, which was 10 years ago, that they
Yeah.
still use it, that's crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Fred comes back and says, if this lady was missing and this lady was dead, then this lady was probably killed right there. Fred, her name is Caren. We know she's a lady. We know she's a woman. Just use her name. Use her name.
Yes, we both had this in our notes. He said it 3 times in one sentence. And the fact that this got past an entire production team without
I
one
know.
person being like, hey, could you say that again but include her name? It sounds so crass. And I understand people who work in this field can become desensitized to these things so that they can probably keep doing their job.
Right.
But it's on the producers of the show to remember that this is going out to the public and they hold that influence here.
Right. At least have the decency and respect to use her name. So now they have to match the blood found at the scene to Karen's blood, but they have no sample of her blood. In 1992, they could compare Karen's mother and her father's blood to the blood found, and she would have half of each parent's DNA.
But unfortunately, her father was deceased, so they asked the FBI to get involved.
They get DNA from Karen's mother,
Karen's 2 sisters,
Karen's 3 children.
and Karen's ex-husband.
Wait, why the ex?
This was done to rule out the other half of her kid's DNA.
The FBI conducts a test called RFLP analysis.
What's an RFLP test?
Restriction Fragment Length Polymorphism Test.
This compares variations in DNA sequences between the blood on the carpet.
And blood samples from Karen's family members.
We see the DNA profiles, but it just looks like Morse code.
It's a lot of lines comparing lines with other lines.
After a lot of attempts to show us how the profiles match,
The FBI forensic analysis tells us
they were totally consistent with the blood coming from Caren Campano.
now today they could do this in a much easier way, right?
oh yeah, today they could probably just take her toothbrush. We've come a really long way in a short period of time.
Well, 8 months later, police arrest Chris for the murder of his wife.
We see footage of Chris walking in what looks like a courthouse, but he is handcuffed to another prisoner. Since when do prisoners have handcuff buddies? Did you notice that?
I did notice that, and I was like, oh, plot twist. Is there going to be a plot twist? Oh, unfortunately, no. They arrest him even though there is no body, but there's the forensic evidence, the argument neighbors have heard, his lack of an alibi, and the fact that he pawned some of her things. They believe Caren never left the house that night.
Then there is the reenactment.
Too much. Too much.
It's too much. The worst part for me, though, was the audio. They have this muffled hitting noise and then the sound of blood splatter casting off onto the walls. I get it. They make these reenactments to help piece together all the forensic science for us stupid audience members, but seriously, showing this helps no one and could actually cause more harm.
Exactly. And the way the actor plops the body on the
Ugh.
ground, then drags her. It's horrifying. It reminded me of Psycho. I don't know if you... Oh, yeah, you went with me and my mom to Halloween Horror Nights in Universal Studios.
Yeah, I've been there.
And
a couple
remember we
times.
went on that tram part and
Yep,
the
the
Bates
Psycho
Motel?
house?
Yes. And
Yeah.
you see him dragging the body out and putting it into the trunk of the car, and then he comes up with a knife.
You're right.
It was like, that
yes.
was that moment for me.
Is this interesting how you can always pull a horror film out
I
of
know.
every episode? I think you've been like, this reminded me of this. I'm like,
Scream, and this reminds me of Psycho, and da-da-da.
yeah. Seriously though, you were on the money with that one. But it gets worse because not only do they want you to believe there's a body in those sheets, they stuck her hair out of the sheets, and you see it as the head hits every single step down the porch outside of the house.
So just as prosecutors were gearing up for the preliminary hearing to convict Chris without a body or a murder, McPeter drops it on us.
But just as the preliminary hearing was set to get underway, everything changed. The police found Caren Campano.
The police found Caren.
Peter says some youngsters on dirt bikes found her. Is it normal to see the skeletal remains on these shows? Because that was a lot for me.
No, I was horrified.
They also found a check under the body. This check is in pretty rough shape, but they can see that it's from her former employer and the amount that it was made out to.
Well, then we're back with a forensic odontologist, Dr. Tom Glass. He compared Caren's dental records with the teeth found from the body and a DNA analysis of the bone marrow. They were able to confirm that it was Caren.
And just like that, Christopher confesses. And since there's a body, we learned that the autopsy confirmed the prosecution's theory of Caren's murder. Thank God for that luminol.
The maxilla were fractured, the mandibles were fractured, the nose was fractured, the sinuses were fractured, the skull was extensively fractured, yet the cervical spine was intact, and there were only 3 fractures in the ribs. So this is not the hallmark of somebody that's been run over by a car or somebody who's had a train wreck or something like that. This is the hallmark of someone who has sustained a severe beating about the head and face. So it was obvious that this was an assault.
Then we meet Detective Joy Nielsen, and she looks too happy for this interview. Do you think?
Her smiling was a bit uncomfortable for me too, but then all I heard was the amount of times men at her police department in the 90s have probably told her to smile more, Joy. And you know what? I just gave her a pass.
Yeah, I guess you're right. In January 1994, Chris went on trial.
We hear from his defense attorney who thought he was being clever by reducing his charge from first-degree murder to manslaughter due to his mental state, but Chris was still sentenced to 1,000 years in prison.
Then they let Chris, Caren's murderer, have the last word in this episode, but we will have none of that here. Any updates or additional info the episode left out?
Yes, actually. So from the Oklahoman.com, after the sentencing was read, Caren's sister chased after Chris's relatives outside the courtroom, shouting and pointing her finger at them. And she yelled, "He will never get out. I'm going to show up at every parole hearing. You lied about my sister. You lied."
Whoa.
Yeah. So remember his mother, who was originally Caren's best friend?
Right.
And that's how they met? Yeah. She testified that her son and Caren had a stormy relationship and that the couple frequently argued. But she said that Caren was moody and prone to frequent outbursts of temper. Now, this article also refers to Caren as the slain woman.
Ew.
Yeah. So journalist Charlotte Aiken, be fucking better.
Yeah, really.
So the article also reveals that the prosecutors had charged Chris with first-degree murder originally. They were also seeking the death penalty. But when the district judge, Tom Smith, declared the punishment unacceptable that the jury first presented to him, the jury foreman tried to withdraw from jury service.
What?
Yeah, I never heard of something like this. So apparently, the jurors had tried to impose a life sentence without the chance of parole.
Okay.
But the judge ordered the jurors to return a sentence that complied with state law.
Oh my God.
So Judge Smith refused the foreman's first request, and then the jurors shortly returned back with this sentence of 1,000 years imprisonment. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand how that complies with the law, but 1,000 years in prison when a human has never lived 1,000 years, I don't know. I don't know how that complies with any law or
that
any
makes no sense to me.
It makes no sense.
Like, of course, the judge is going to say, no, you need to comply with state law.
Of course.
So complying with state law means that you can still give a person 1,000 years in jail, which you obviously know he's not going to live.
Yeah.
What's the difference between just giving him that
a life sentence
or the life sentence?
Yeah, because then they say Chris also had 2 prior convictions for burglary and concealing stolen property. Apparently, the minimum sentence that the jurors could have imposed was 20 years, but the maximum would have been a life prison term.
What?
So they could have still given him I don't know. Just make it make sense.
And he's still in prison.
He is still in prison, from what I could find. He's 59 years old, still in prison.
59 years old?
Yeah.
Well, what was it? 1,000 years? Oh,
yeah, 1,000 years.
That's a lot of tick marks on a jail cell.
There's a lot of tick marks, yeah. But apparently he isn't in there without the possibility of parole. So he still has those parole hearings. So I don't know how it works, but every so often he comes up for parole. And that's what that sister was saying.
Yep, she's going to come back.
Yeah, she's like, I'll be at every hearing. Well, now for our missing person cases we would like everyone to know about. From the Black and Missing Foundation's website and newsbreak.com is the missing persons case of Elijah Michael Drew. Elijah, a native of Oklahoma City, was reported missing on October 17th, 2022. He is described as a black and African-American male, 5'11", and weighs around 130 pounds. He has black hair, brown eyes, and at the time of his disappearance, he was wearing a green and white hat and hoodie, khakis, and white Jordans that were hand-painted. He has a tattoo on his left shoulder, a tribal sleeve, feather on his right arm, and a bull rider on his chest. A family member is quoted saying, "My mom dropped him off on Monday, October 17th, 2022, near Sheridan and Hudson Avenue in Oklahoma City. He was planning to meet with friends. 3 days later, on October 20th, Elijah informed my mom that he was boarding a Metro Transit bus and would reach out to her later. That was the last communication anyone has had with him. Since then, Elijah's phone has been disconnected, and the family's attempts to trace his digital footprints, such as credit card alerts or social media activity, have come up empty. If you or anyone you know has any information regarding Elijah Michael Drew's whereabouts, please contact the Oklahoma City Police at 405-297-1129. It's vital to mention the case number when providing details. That number is 2022-0088-110. You can also submit information to the Black and Missing Foundation's tip line at blackandmissinginc.com/tipline.
And from the Bureau of Indian Affairs.gov and Reddit's Unsolved Mysteries subreddit is the missing persons case of David Allen Crabtree. April 9th, 2 days after David came home, he ran away again. That evening, David told his family, "I love you," and that he was going to bed. It is believed sometime between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., David snuck out of his bedroom window, never to return. Later, at around 10 p.m., James decided to go check on his little brother and make sure he was okay. This is where his family realized that David was not in his bed and had left the family home. One of David's sisters later remembered seeing 3 boys waiting outside of her brother's window that evening. Although they invited her to join them, she refused, to which David told her he would see her tomorrow, and left. There have been alleged sightings of David, but this has not been confirmed. He has never been confirmed as seen or heard from again. Although he had a history of running away from April 9th, 2000, David would always either return home on his own accord or be seen around town with friends. But sadly, there has been no solid indication of his whereabouts since April 2000, and the circumstances of his disappearance are unclear. David had straight, brown hair, may have had or began to have grown a mustache, brown eyes, scar on one eyebrow, possibly right eyebrow, scar on upper front center of his head. He had previously sustained an unspecified injury to his clavicle. He is of Cherokee descent. His age today would be 37. He is listed as 125 pounds, 5'5", and was last seen wearing a gray shirt and black pants. If you have any information or know someone who does, please submit your tip to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. His case number is 131-8013. You can also submit information to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, Oklahoma City, at 1-800-522-8017 and give them his case number. Again, that is 131-8013. You can also submit case information or tips to the BIA one of 3 ways. Text capital letters BIAMMU and your tip to 847-411. Call in tips to 1-833-560-2065 or email capital letters OJS_MMU@BIA.gov.
We will also post the case information on our Instagram at Forensic Files Podcast, but first please go and follow at Black and Missing FDN and at MMI Who Is Missing. Thank you.
Episode 6.
We did episode 6. Oh my God. Woo!
You sound tired.
I am so tired. We recorded when Blake is traveling out of town. I got both kids to bed.
You nailed it.
Bam! I did it.
Boom, bam, bop.
Boom, bam, bop. I didn't have a mental breakdown. I've missed you. I feel like I didn't talk to you a lot.
Obviously, we're doing this remote, but I feel like every time we get to do this, it just makes my heart happy.
Anyone who doesn't know us, I know you and I know this, we have gone a very long time.
Years, I guess that's dramatic.
We probably haven't gone years, but there's probably been close to a year that we didn't talk on like the phone.
Right.
You know?
Right.
We might have texted each other, which is crazy because I feel like I still see you every day. I don't know. It's so weird.
But that is true friendship, people, because the best friends that you have are the ones that you don't have to talk to for a long time. And then the moment you pick up that phone, it's like, feels like yesterday. So
Yep, exactly. If you like our podcast, please drop a review to tell us what you think. But most importantly, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please hit those 3 little dots on our podcast page. Select follow to subscribe to our podcast, then tap settings and turn on automatic download. And I hope you've followed all of that.
And if you listen anywhere else, a review and follow would also be great. Anything to help us spread the word. Share us on social media, share on Reddit, share everywhere.
Everywhere, please. Our next episode will be from season 14, episode 20, and it's called Funeral Services. Don't like the sound of it. Don't like the sound of it.
I kind of do. This sounds like a scary movie.
It probably is like one, but it's real.
Right, it's real. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. And please, 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 like we said before, please go follow us on all social media handles and give us that like and follow. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, until the next one. Thank you.
Bye. Of course you give me the hardest word.
But you're really good at sounding things out.
I know, but polymorphism. It's polymorphism. Okay, I feel like we're playing Clue in this episode. Mrs. Green and
Mr. Glass.
Like Mr. Glass and Mr.
Dead Man. Oh my
Mr.
God.
Dead Man. I just feel like we're playing a board game here.
I wish we were. I wish we were. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please hit those 3 little... Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Another one.
Ugh.